when you have an open mind, it opens so many doors, because if you can start being open-minded, it makes that person feel safe for sharing their story. And now you might share your story as well. And I think it has like that ripple effect that, we all have to do our part. It's not just the person sharing their story. That is kind of the first step to changing these conversations, is one person shares their story.
Connection is at the heart of Seek the Joy podcast. And over the last 2 years, through this series, Lessons In, we've had incredible conversations that focus on the moments in our lives that shape us. From exploring conversations around resiliency, self-love, finding our path, forgiveness, shifting our mindset, and so much more, this series continues to explore the joys we can find through these experiences and the connection and community we can create through sharing our reflections. It's an incredible, open, and honest look at the moments in our lives that impact us, inspire us, bring us together, and build greater connection. Every episode, including the one you're going to hear today, features a conversation that will leave you feeling inspired, motivated, and get you thinking about the moments in your life and the lessons that they've taught you. Every moment spent in connection changes who we are for the better, so let's dive right back in. Welcome back to another episode of Lessons In from Seek the Joy podcast. Welcome back to Seek the Joy podcast. Welcome back to another episode of Lessons In. I'm your host, Sydney Weiss, and today Zane Landin joins us to share a lesson he's learned about how storytelling can bring about transformational change. And I think we've really seen the impact of storytelling in the last couple of years, especially with the pandemic, everything we've gone through as a collective, but also our own personal individual experiences. Because when you make the decision to share your story, and it can be with your journal or a friend or a family member, or if you take that step to share your story online or create a space to share stories, the impact is so far reaching. And I think we often underestimate the impact and the power of sharing our story. And this podcast, Seek the Joy podcast, for me from the very beginning has been about storytelling and how can we share our stories to remind not only ourselves but also others that we're really never alone in what it is that we're experiencing. So today, Zane joins me for this conversation, and he shares how a school project turned into an online magazine dedicated to sharing inspiring, powerful, community-based stories. And spoiler, that magazine is called PositiveVibes Magazine, and if you haven't checked it out, definitely do so after you listen to today's new episode. We talk about how we can create safe spaces to share our stories, and really the impact of remaining open-minded. Zane dives into the power of sharing authentic stories that offer hope and the unexpected moments that can often serve as a catalyst for our own healing and transformation. We also talk about the impact of sharing stories on our joy and the lessons that come from storytelling. Zane's reflections, his honesty and vulnerability in this one, I just know it's going to leave you feeling inspired and also remind you that we can turn our hardships into something beautiful if only we have the courage to share our story. Now more than ever, I just think it's so important that we have reliable resources that we can turn to. And that's where today's sponsor, BetterHelp, comes in. So I would love to share with you a little bit more about BetterHelp. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. And it's easy and free to change counselors if you don't think the person you've matched with is a good fit. And no matter where you're listening to Seek the Joy podcast right now, you can also use BetterHelp because the service is available for people worldwide too. I just think it's so valuable to talk to someone about what it is that you're going through, whether that's anxiety, depression, grief, loss, changes at work, or friendship dynamics or relationships, or you want to talk about the challenges of the last couple of years. And BetterHelp offers a broad range of expertise in their counselor network. So you'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions too, which I still think is a game changer. I really want you to live a happier, more joyful, and just ease-filled life. That's why I share these conversations with you. And so I'm just excited to share that as a listener of Seek the Joy podcast, you will get 10% off your first month by going to betterhelp.com/seekthejoy. Join over 1 million people and counting, taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/seekthejoy. The link will also be included in our show notes. The role of community in storytelling is huge, and we all have a community around us, but you also have the power to create greater community when you start to share your story. And I think that's probably one of my favorite moments from today's episode with Zane is just the impact of putting our story out there and the lessons that come from storytelling and just the optimism, joy, and positivity that's possible. But we're not talking like toxic positivity here. We're talking like the ability to hold struggle and hardship and loss and grief and disappointment in one hand and joy, hope, love, encouragement, empowerment in the other. So Zane, thank you so much for this conversation. I want to tell you guys a little bit more about Zane before we dive in. He's a strategic storyteller and public relations imagineer. He's an advocate for disability and mental health rights. And he started his own digital magazine to spark conversations about mental health during the pandemic. He's running his own public relations agency representing mental health, wellness, and spirituality, and he's currently a senior at Cal Poly Pomona. So, Zane, thank you so much for this one. As always, guys, I can't wait to hear what you think about today's new episode, so make sure to join the conversation on our social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We are at Seek the Joy Podcast everywhere. Hit follow or subscribe wherever you're tuning in. Leave us a 5-star rating and review. Just letting you know we will be off next week. No new episode of the podcast, but I'll see you back here in June. Like, where is this year going? I have no idea. So, all right, that's it. Without further ado, let's dive into this one. Lessons in storytelling to bring about transformational change with Zane Landin. Zane, thank you for coming on the podcast. You are doing so many cool things, and I would love for you to talk about your background and how you got into PositiveVibes Magazine. It's early. It's the morning, but you turned, I know, this like incredible school project into an online magazine that's dedicated to sharing inspiring and powerful community-based storytelling. And I know that it has brought about such transformational, positive change for both you and your readers, because I'm a reader. So I would just love to know, like, how did all of this come about? How did you get started?
Of course, and thank you again for having me on this. It's so exciting to collaborate and work together. And anyways, I started Positive Vibes Magazine very early on in the pandemic. So it started in May of 2020, which that's really 2 to 3 months into the pandemic, and I thought that I personally wanted to see a space dedicated to mental health during the pandemic. There are actually many platforms doing that, but I just wasn't around that, and I wanted to just start one myself, especially since I also wanted to tackle the media's lack of dedication and coverage of mental health. I thought that the mainstream media hasn't done a good job in covering mental health, even like some of the mainstream major news channels, not really talking about the mental health community or talking about mental health community, but using it as a way to augment other communities, never on its own. And so I wanted there to be a space for people to experience inspiring stories during COVID, because it's not something we're seeing. And I think what's interesting is the authentic, positive storytelling. It's something that I think is going to change a lot. And I think it's something we're seeing lately. And like employers are telling authentic stories of their employees, of like diversity, inclusion, and so many different things. I think authentic, positive storytelling is actually going to change a lot in the future. And so I'm actually really excited to see what that looks like. And I'm not saying we started that, no, but it's just great seeing that across the board with many people doing podcasts, sharing just, people's journeys. And I think people resonate with that so much more now than other things, because they can feel inspired or transformed by it. And so, yeah, as you said, it started off as a school project that we had to just create a publication for the copywriting class, and I decided to actually pursue it. It just came into my mind one time when I was chatting with my friend, and I thought, why don't we actually start something like this? Because what exactly is stopping us it's all about just spreading positivity. We don't need to be millionaires to start something like this, which is what taught me, anyone can kind of start anything they can. And there's always those little things telling you not to do it. And so I decided to go against that and just try it and see what happens. And, since then we've been able to feature so many people, and it's actually aided my growth so much because I am surrounded by these people now. It's not just reading about them. It's like actually interviewing them and engaging with them. And I've been able to do like around, I don't know, 60 to 65 interviews. And I'm sure, as you can imagine, you just learn so much during these interviews, and they really help you grow personally. And it's just great to share and amplify their messaging on your platform and see exactly how you can inspire them, your audience through their story. I hope that makes sense. But
no, that makes so much sense.
And also, as you said, it's transformed me with helping my mental health, and also we've been able to tap into the spirituality realm, and so it's opened up kind of a world of going into different spirituality and questioning different things, and always being open-minded to everything that's possible with people who are mediums or psychics or people who believe in afterlife or whatever it is, stuff that I've never really been exposed to as much, and it's really helped challenge me. So it's helped everything.
Thank you for sharing all of that. There are a couple of things that you said that really stuck out to me, and it's this piece about authentic storytelling. And you were talking about how you feel or you see in the future it's going to shift. And I was reflecting on, I feel in a lot of ways the pandemic helped shift our comfort level with being open and honest about our reality, our day-to-day reality, the struggles that we experience. And I think we're seeing it at all levels. Like if you're in corporate America, I think bosses are more willing to be open about their journeys and more receptive to those of their employees. Or if you're in online spaces, people are more open about what they're experiencing with their mental health and, the need to take a break and burnout. And I think that the nature of conversation has changed so much. So you're right. I think it's going to be interesting to see how this continues to shift over time. And as we all continue to step into sharing our stories in a way that feels safe and comfortable and honest for ourselves, I think it's going to have a big impact too.
I agree. I've seen such a huge shift from the pandemic. I just personally hope that the pandemic doesn't allow people to stay that way. I mean, what I mean is like going back to normal, and that the pandemic is the inspiration to stay that way. Because when we do reach endemic, whenever we do, if we're doing it right now, I'm not really sure, but I don't want places and organizations to go back to not providing that safe space to share authentic stories. I don't want COVID to be the excuse to do that, because it's like, I remember hearing, oh, this is such a horrible time. I understand if you have to take off time. I mean, I don't think that that's a good reason to accept someone needing to pick up their kids or something as like, if they don't work that day or have to take some time off, I just hope that we don't go away from that as things get more back to normal.
Yeah. It's about seeing this as a cultural shift, and not just like the pandemic was like the reason behind taking better care of yourself or being able to leave to go pick up your kids from school and take them to soccer practice. Like this is a cultural dynamic shift, I think is what you're saying. Yeah. Totally. I know like one of the questions that you ask through your work and your platform with PositiveVibes Magazine is how can we shift the world, but not just shift the world, how can we do so positively? And I know a huge aspect of this is about community and building community. And so I'm curious about the role of community in storytelling. I have my perspective, but I would just love to hear your thoughts, maybe just about this role of community and its connection to storytelling.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. When we think about telling our stories, it's always about telling our personal stories and sharing our truths and using I statements. I think that's all, really empowering and important. But I think what's really cool is when you have to think about when someone's telling their story, even if they use I statements, they have a whole community behind them, and a community that we may not even see. Like my community, your community, everyone has this community. And I think that that's what brings the storytelling to life, is how your community has shaped who you are and also what you've gone through individually. And I think when you hear that, it's like recognizing that community is so important, not just from the stories you tell, but then when you tell your stories, the community you're going to impact.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting how you can have community or you can create it. And I think, again, the more you are personally sharing your truth, you're creating community. And you never know what. I mean, I don't think a community has to be, a group of people you're always connected with, like physically. Sometimes I think that, just putting it out there and even putting your story out there, you have a community that's supporting you. You don't even know it. You may not even know it. And I think there's something really beautiful about that. Because sometimes we don't need to know exactly how we impact people. Just know that putting yourself out there can impact people, and just keep being yourself and being true to that. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when you make the choice to share your story or put something on the internet, like a post talking about what you've been experiencing, or even this cool place that you've been, it could be anything. You really don't know how that is going to impact someone else. So interesting that you said community in storytelling can even be just putting your story, your message out there. And it has this domino effect to people that you don't even know, that you don't even know it's having this impact on. And something that I've been reflecting a lot on in the last 4.5 years, almost 5 years of doing this podcast is, and I said this from the very, very beginning, and I know, Zane, you and I have had so many conversations about this, that we all really have a story that's worth sharing, but we don't always recognize that there is a place or a space to share that story. And I think we can underestimate the value and the impact of our story and the way that it impacts us, but also those around us, and then those that we don't even know. And so I'm curious, through the magazine and the platform that you've built, how have you been able to create this space, or create a safe space maybe for people to feel that they can reflect on their journey or share what they're creating in the world? Because I think it's a beautiful gift to be able to create a space where people like come to it and feel inspired and want to share and know that they're going to be accepted. So I'm curious how that's been a focus for you, and how you've really been able to do that.
Yeah, no, and I never thought we would do that, because at first we were just thinking of writing blog posts about mental health, and our first couple of postings that is about like going to therapy and using creative writing. But we had one person reach out about being interviewed, and they experienced numerous levels of death at a very young age, and they're a life coach now, and they do a lot of different things, and it's really exciting that someone actually reached out at the time. And that was like the first person we ever interviewed. And I actually wasn't involved in that interview. My writer was at the time. But afterward, I was able to do some interviews. And I just think what I did was I just allowed people to have the space to talk about whatever they wanted, and no judgment. And I think that was what inspires people, is, seeing people being their unapologetic self as a story, I think inspires people. And that's where people may reach out, or they may feel inspired to tell their stories to their community members or their families or whatever it is. And I think that's exactly what we're always trying to preach, is just be your unapologetic self and just embrace who you are. And this is a space to do so. And it's really interesting. I've had some interviews where I've had to ask a lot of questions, and I've had some interviews where I didn't have to ask anything because they were talking for almost 40 minutes.
Wow.
Which to me, that's exciting, because then maybe that's normal for them, but it's still very nice that they did feel comfortable enough to share that. And I just try my best to just be present and be engaging and be intentional as I can. And I think that hopefully people can feel that presence, and then they're able to, build off that energy, and then, just be themselves. And, it's always exciting to see not just the interview go up, but then when we share like the draft of the story, they're always really excited to see it and see their story, transformed in written material, and they really love it. So that's really exciting. I think hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it's this piece about creating a space with no judgment, no barrier to entry, right? It's like, if you want to share your story, we're here and ready and open and willing and able to share your story. And I think when you cultivate a space without judgment, when you make it very known that, hey, like, this is a space where you can be very honest about and very vulnerable about what it is that you're experiencing, no matter who you are in the world, I think it comes across. And that's what I've tried to do as well with the podcast, with Stories of Inspiring Joy, and with Joy Corner as well, is really send this message of, hey, like, this space, this platform is meant to share your story in any which way that you feel the most comfortable and able and excited to. And I just feel excited to be able to do that for you. And I think it's interesting. Like, I had that intention from the very beginning, and I just find it so cool. Like, when you hold an intention, it has this ability to sort of project out of the thing that you've created and into the world or into the universe, so to speak. And I feel like a similar vibe, I guess you could say, with what you've created with Positive Vibes as well, where it kind of comes through that was your intention. That was your goal, to provide that space for people to reflect and to share and to be open and honest without that judgment.
No, yeah, and I love what you're doing too. And I think, having that space and, just reading about when someone does grow through some of the things that, that people go through, I think that's inspiring as well, because you don't have that feeling that you're alone. And I think that some of the things that, some of the people that we featured, what they've gone through, as I'm sure you can kind of, you've experienced probably doing this, is, some people have been, involved in gangs, who've been sexually assaulted and, or raped or horribly taken advantage of. And I think that's where the inspiration comes from, because they've been able to transform those really horrible hardships into, something beautiful. It's kind of like a butterfly. That's how I kind of see it, that, they were kind of trapped in like that cocoon, and then like, they actually evolved into a butterfly, and they're, even though it was horrible what happens to them, they're using it in a good way, and they're using it to aid in their healing and make an impact in the world. So when someone sees that online and says, oh, they've been, raped or sexually assaulted or something really horrible, something like that, it's like, wow, I've been through that. And why don't we talk about this more in society? Why are people not comfortable talking about this? And I think we're moving towards people talking more about stuff like that more comfortably in mental health, but we're still very far from it. So It's nice to give some people the space to do that. And even if it doesn't create the impact we're thinking, or maybe as long as it impacts that one person, I think that's fine. And hearing a story like that, it's got to impact someone, especially since so many people have experienced that.
Yeah, I think it goes to show that you never know what the catalyst is going to be to like begin that transformation for yourself. I love what you said, that it can aid in your healing. This moment that we might otherwise categorize as really tragic or dark or grief-stricken or horrendous, whatever, it can really be this catalyst that ends up aiding in your healing. And it's often through making that choice to explore our story or share our story or dive into our story, either on our own or with the help of someone else who's sitting down and we're having a conversation, or we're doing a podcast or whatever it might be, that really allows you, I think it's a bit of like a perspective shift too, that comes as a result of like engaging in a conversation about your story, that allows you to sit back and go, oh, wait, yeah, this was horrible, but maybe this was the catalyst that allowed me to move from caterpillar to butterfly, like to come out of the cocoon, as you said. I mean, there's no way to know in the moment, but so interesting. I've seen that too in the conversations I've had for the podcast, or the people I've interviewed, or what I've read, the submissions that come through for Joy Corner is like, whoa, there are it's like more often than not where there's this moment that serves as that catalyst for change. And it's not just change, it's like this transformation that like wouldn't otherwise take place.
I think that's exactly it. And especially when you mentioned at the beginning of this, the transformational positivity, I wish that was more of a well-known term. I would love for it to be more popular, because that's exactly what it is. It's, how you transform your wounds or hardships into positivity. And I think that that's really inspiring, and that's where it's very empowering, especially, I don't want to like stop people from sharing their story, but what's so empowering is when you see people actually use something from what they've experienced. I think some people are at different places in their storytelling, and sometimes some people, it is very hard But what I love about these stories is they're at a place where they can speak on it positively, that it's something they've gone through and now they're trying to help others. That's really empowering for others, because to actually see someone go through that and be an icon or be successful, it kind of takes away some grief that you're experiencing, that, of what happened to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think part of sharing your story or storytelling, or just talking about the impact of this work in general, I think a lot about the different lessons that have come to me in my life as a result of the podcast, as a result of these conversations, as a result of storytelling. And so I'm curious, Zane, is there like a lesson or something that you've learned the most about yourself, or maybe even just the impact of storytelling through this journey over the last, I guess it's been 2 years, right? Since you started the magazine, which is incredible. Is there a
Almost.
lesson? Is there a lesson or anything that sort of stands out to you as you reflect on this time for yourself?
Yes. And yeah, it's almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in May, so just 2 months away. And yeah, throughout the past 2 years, I think the main lesson I've learned is don't underestimate people, and also just be open-minded. That's the main thing I ask people, because we share so many different stories. Like yourself, we share all these stories, and you know what? We do not have to resonate with all of them. And I think that's fine. If there is a story you don't resonate with, then you don't resonate with it. You don't have to. But just be open-minded to their perspective, though. Like, you can say, "Oh, I don't agree with what this person's saying. I don't vibe with it." That's fine. But we can still have respect, and we can still acknowledge people's stories. I think we're in like this place in society where it's easy to dismiss people because I don't agree with you, or we don't get along, or we're too different. I don't like that. I don't like that, because we're so different, because we look at those differences so, like, we scrutinize those differences. Instead, we should be looking at what actually makes that community. Like you said before, like, how do we actually build that community? So not finding what makes us different, but finding what actually makes us similar and how we can actually build from that. I think that's the one thing I've learned. And when you have an open mind, it opens so many doors. Because if you can start being open-minded, it makes that person feel safer sharing their story. And now you might share your story as well. And I think it has like that ripple effect that, we all have to do our part. It's not just the person sharing their story. That is kind of the first step to changing these conversations, is one person shares their story, but if no one does anything about it, or they're open-minded to it, it's unfortunate that not much will change from that person sharing their story. And it's sad that that person sharing their story may not, have the weight that it could have if you had people in the room who, were open-minded. Or even like before, when people had all these concerns about DE&I stuff, or diversity inclusion, and people just weren't, supporting it because they just didn't understand it, or they weren't open-minded to it. And if we can just kind of try and get rid of that, that tunnel vision that we have, and we all have it. We all have tunnel vision when it comes to certain things, because we all have biases, and so we can try and move away from them just by listening to someone and being open-minded. It's that simple. Because listening and being open-minded, you'll be surprised how much you have in common with someone, just because you have very different philosophies. But again, even if you don't at all, that doesn't mean you can't still respect each other.
I think that's yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to end.
Please continue.
I think we just forget that we're humans, and that we see so much division nowadays with everything, literally everything, in a way. And so I think we need to stop with the division storytelling or divisive storytelling and move to the community-based storytelling.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's such a good point, because there's a beautiful ripple effect that comes from being open-minded, from making, I think, the choice for yourself to remain open-minded. And when part of that ripple effect, part of that domino effect, is greater kindness, greater support, greater empathy, a greater understanding that we are more alike than we are different. You're right. There is so much divisive. I can't talk today. It's like too early in the morning on a Sunday. There's too much storytelling or conversation that's meant to divide us than is meant to unite us. And I think part of being open-minded in these spaces, or just in your life in general, is about normalizing the fact that we're not always going to agree with each other, and normalizing the fact that we're going to have conversations that are difficult. We're going to have conversations that will challenge us. We're going to have a conversation where I might think one thing and you might think another, but that doesn't mean that we can't still unite around our shared empathy, humanity, and the fact that at the end of the day, we're all human, just like you said. And so I think you're spot on. It's about coming back to remembering that if you can start with being open-minded, it has this incredible domino effect that we may not even recognize in the moment. So thank you for sharing that. That makes so much sense.
Yeah, of course. And I hope it's something that people can continue doing. And even through the magazine, since, as you're aware of, we're always presented with so many different perspectives and so many different stories. I just don't imagine myself having the right to say someone's story is right or wrong, or that's a weird way to think. It's always, no, everyone's perspective, is powerful and they need to be listened to. Like one of my favorite interviews I did was with Amy White, and she is a medium, and she's
a total friend of Seek the Joy podcast. She was
yes, I saw that. I saw that she followed, and I saw that
she's wonderful.
And I was like, I think Amy's amazing, and that was like that was probably one of the first interviews I did, because that was in the summer when I first started, basically, and yeah, her interview left me shocked in a very good way, because our energies just vibe really well, and we did Instagram Live recently when it marked like the 1 year. So I think that was in the summer, and again, our energies vibe really well, and we were able to just carry a seamless conversation. But anyways, she's someone that, I really love talking to, but my lived experience is not mediumship. I wish it was, but it's not something I've experienced. It's not something, I don't know if I ever will, but I'm not opposed to it. I'm not opposed to, maybe it will happen to me one day. But just because it's not my lived experience doesn't mean I'm going to deny someone else their lived experience because it's not mine. So while I personally don't get mediumship because I've never experienced it myself, I'm not going to sit here and say it doesn't exist, because I think it does. And I never would have thought that. I didn't even know what medium was until I had the chance to talk to Amy. I was like, what's a medium? Because I really thought when I researched she's a medium, I was like, oh, so she specializes in medium, like content, like the website Medium. Like I really didn't know what that meant. But then I looked it up. I was like, oh wow, I didn't even know that there was like a whole community about this. And I think it's really, it's not to be mean, but it's a little arrogant to say all these mediums are frauds. I'm like, there's literally thousands of a community of mediums, and I don't think it's our place to say they're wrong when it's just something we haven't experienced. It's all about just being open-minded, like I said before,
Yeah. I mean, that's such a good point. Just because you haven't experienced it yourself doesn't mean that it isn't real or true for someone else, which I think is a total important reminder and perspective for all of us to carry. You are on Seek the Joy podcast, so I got to ask you about joy in your life, and I have to ask you, maybe tying this through the magazine and storytelling, curious about the impact of joy in your life over the last 2 years through sharing these stories, through talking to people like Amy, through having these experiences. Has there been more joy? Has joy showed up differently for you? What does that look like?
Of course, I think that joy has showed up differently, because what the magazine what we try and teach is, joy or positivity or optimism is not a linear path in the slightest. It's kind of like a roller coaster, and you can't see that roller coaster either, because you can't see when you're going to go down. So it has showed up differently for me just because of all the different things I've experienced. But what I would say is I do think that the magazine has brought more joy, just because it's given me like those tools of optimism and positivity where I'm able to, when I experience something, to be inspired by the people I have listened to, and also just hear what they've gone through. And it's like, I'm going through something very similar, actually. And to hear them talk about what helped them, I can apply it. So I can physically apply some of the stuff that they've talked about into my life, and that's helped so much. So it's been like a learning guide from many people, but also just being exposed to sharing positive content is very helpful as well. Even sometimes when I'm, not feeling it, I'm still researching positive quotes or positive messages around mental health and all that stuff, and sharing people's stories. So it kind of keeps me in that space of being positive. And even when I forget those positive roots, I will always remember the stuff I've read, and I continue to do so. And I really wish there was something in the world about optimism, joy, and positivity, like a college course. I really wish there was like looking at the different cultures and how they seek joy or how they see positivity and how they are resilient during these times. I think that would be really interesting because I think resiliency is the main thing I'm talking about. If it's joy, positivity, optimism, it's all together in this. I think that it all has developed like resiliency, and to the point where I've experienced a lot of different things during the pandemic, as we all have. And I think that it's really great that we can all come out of it even stronger than before, and even, like we said, more understanding, which I love, because it's about time that we're at a equal playing field at this point, where we may not be all equal, but it's nice that we're all seeing each other as equal. Even though we were on the computer and everything was digitalized, I felt like there was actually a little more humanity because we were on the same page. Like, I've never experienced that in my life where I saw that people were all on the same page and everyone, that's how it felt. And I feel like the whole world was at a stillness. And we talk about stillness, like meditating. I think that I talked about this recently with someone that, you know, when you meditate, you're trying to get to that stillness or that feeling of inner reflection. And a lot of people don't even know what stillness is or what meditation is, or maybe they do, but they've never done it. But I really think that like the pandemic was kind of like a weird meditation, because we all had to be stuck with our thoughts at home, and we all had to kind of reflect on who we are, and we had to kind of have made changes from that. And so all that stuff, because this whole magazine was born from the pandemic and all the uncertainty the pandemic has brought. So it's very interesting to see how it has impacted my life. And now I know that, you know, we're really truly not alone, and we should kind of, I wish we would stop acting like we are. And I'm not saying that people do that by choice. I'm just saying, you know, I wish we were there more for each other, and that we would reach out more, and also people would lend a hand more. I hope that makes sense, all I'm saying. I know it's a little rambly.
I appreciate what you were saying about joy, optimism, and positivity and its connection to resilience. And not to say that when you go through a hardship, the first thing you're thinking about is, okay, where's my joy? Where's my joy? Where's my positivity? In fact, it doesn't come right away, but often I have found through recognizing and acknowledging what it is that I'm experiencing in any given moment. And over time, it does lend itself to greater joy because I'm allowing myself to experience those more, challenging emotions, I guess you could say, is how we categorize it as a society. And through connecting with others and through storytelling, I mean, that has been such a huge part of my healing process in the last 4.5 years, and has lent itself, just like you were sharing, to greater joy, because joy looks different for me now than it did in 2016 or 2017, whatever, the time frame is. And so I'm wondering, as we close out this conversation and I'm reflecting on what we've talked about here today, so much of the transformational change that comes from storytelling and engaging in these spaces is recognizing that joy comes from this sense of resiliency, and resiliency also comes from joy. From optimism, joy, and positivity can come greater self-awareness and greater confidence in yourself and a greater understanding and greater connection. I mean, there's like, I'm imagining like when we were in school and we would draw these like little graphs, and then lines would come out of the circle, thinking of it like as a spider web and all these beautiful things, right, that come out of it. So I just so appreciate what you shared in that perspective, because I think so much of this transformational change is about the way maybe we start to look at joy, positivity, and optimism very differently. And in doing so, it brings us together in a way that maybe we didn't anticipate or wouldn't have happened otherwise. Food for thought. Thought.
No, I agree with that. And I also want to, share my perspective on joy, positivity, and optimism. It's not about, I don't think it's about, denying your feelings or always having that joy or positivity, like you said, where's my joy? or where's my positivity? Why can't I be positive? You don't need to be. The whole point of the positive storytelling journey is these people have gone through something, but they've been able to turn that into positivity and inspiration. But I don't think they're very positive at the time when it first happened. Maybe some of them were, but chances are, if you go through something and what you're going through, allow yourself to go through it. I think if you're going to try and find positivity right away, you might be masking your feelings or masking your experiences, and that could have some horrible underlying effects in the future. I'm not going to speak for everyone, but that would happen with me. But I think that, it's all about just having those tools and that resiliency to keep pushing forward. But it's not about always being positive, because that's literally impossible. Amen. And I think if our expectations to always be positive, we'll 100% fail. There's no way we could always do that. Even when you see people on TV or people who are really bubbly, sometimes they're the most depressed people, because maybe they want to help, maybe they want other people to feel better, maybe they want to feel better in that moment. But I think when we see constant positivity or constant happiness, it's not the best, because that's just not what we're designed to do. We're not designed to have, Inside Out is the perfect example. If anyone's seen that movie. Such a good movie. Yeah, Joy right there, she learns that the other emotions are equally as important as her, and the sadness that comes about that character brings the joy and community, because at the end, when she's sad by herself, her teammates come and cheer up. That community came about. I just love that. And so yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for coming on the podcast. I would love it if you would share where everyone can connect with you, connect with the magazine, maybe share their story and learn more.
Oh yeah, if you're interested, you can follow me on my personal pages, which is like my first and last name. And then there's also the magazine socials, which are it's not Positive Vibes Magazine, it's Positive Vibes Mag. Those are the handles, except for YouTube and LinkedIn, so Facebook and Instagram. And then the website is PositiveVibesMag.com, where you can see some of the really cool stories that we've been able to share, and reach out if you want to be, if you want your voice amplified. We're always looking for people, anyone. So thank you so much, Sydney, for this. This was super exciting. I know it's been in the works for some time, so it's great to actually do it and really talk about these things in a deep, meaningful way.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Zane. Everything will go in the show notes. We'll make it so easy for everyone to connect with you, to connect with the magazine, follow along and learn more. And just thanks for such a wonderful conversation. Really, I think talking about the lessons maybe that come in our lives through storytelling and, this perspective shift too on positivity, optimism, and joy. So thanks again. This was really fun. Seek the Joy podcast is a production of Seek the Joy Media and created, produced, and hosted by me, Sydney Weiss. You can tune into all of our episodes on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're enjoying the show, hit follow and leave us a 5-star rating and review. Make sure to join the community, join the conversation on our social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We are at Seek the Joy podcast everywhere. And don't forget, you can actually watch today's new episode and all of our episodes on our brand new YouTube channel. Click that link in the show notes to subscribe and tune in. As always, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you right back here next week for another Seek the Joy Tuesday.